And we're starting. And we are live, everybody. Welcome. Apologies for the slight delay. Welcome, Paula. Nice to see you again after PlatformCon. All right, we are having the usual small technical difficulties here. As you guys know, the session today is going to be with Paula and with Matteo. And Matteo, I think, is on his way to join us. So let me also just double check. And please, everyone, just drop in the chat where you're joining from. And I'm just checking whether Matteo maybe is. Oh, Jorge, I see you're there. So Jorge works with Matteo. So Jorge, if you're sitting close to Matteo or you have him on Slack, just ping him. Hi. Yeah, and Jorge, yeah, so when everyone is sending messages, send to everyone, not just to host and panelists, so that everyone can sit. All right, let me see. Okay, I'm there. Are you? I don't see you. Not yet. All right, sorry, apologies, guys. Give us just like one more second to figure this out. In the meantime, the session obviously is on. We're going to discuss some of the highlights from PlatformCon. So I hope you guys all had time to watch the talks at this point. At this point, there's been a lot of good questions and conversations in the Platform Engineering Slack. And by the way, I do apologize for the background noise if it's too loud. Clearly, I'm sitting in the car and it's raining. But that's the beauty of, oh, Matteo, I see you. Let me promote to panelist. Okay. All right. Here it is. Matteo, hello.
Hey guys, sorry, I was lost on the internet. I was on a Google Meet link somewhere.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That tends to happen sometimes. But we're all here. So I think we can get going because it's already been 7 minutes. So obviously, as I was saying, the session today is really more of a conversation. We have a few talking points that we prepared, but please feel free to jump in anytime. Use the Q&A. The Q&A is actually the best feature so that we can actually queue stuff. But otherwise, also just drop in the chat, get in. Tell us if there's anything that you want to discuss, that you want us to discuss about platform engineering in general, about PlatformCon talk specifically. It's really an open conversation, so feel free to jump in. And so I think we can start actually with, what you both think, Paul and Matteo, where some of the kind of hottest trends from PlatformCon within the kind of wider space of platform engineering. So what did you see there that, particularly jumped out to you, that you thought was interesting? And let's take that as a starting point, and then we can go and kind of like what that means for you and how you see that evolve. Paula, you wanna start?
Sure. I'd like to firstly say thank you to you, Luca, and to the whole team who put the conference together. I thought it was really good, really, really good. There were some interesting conversations. There was some interesting content. There was lots of activity in the Slack channels. I know from personal experience how hard it is to put an event together. So I just want to start by saying a massive thank you to you and the team because it was very, very good. I think for me, what was interesting. No, you're welcome. For me, an interesting comment I heard, which wasn't in PlatformCon, it was a conversation I had maybe a couple of days later. I was talking to a group of folks who are focused on the DevOps space in particular. And someone made a comment that was, platform engineering is the new hotness in DevOps, which I thought was quite interesting because I agree. Let me put it that way. Platform engineering is a space that I have been working in for a number of years and I'm passionate about. And I also agree that it feels like it's having this surge of interest right now. It does feel like people have been on a journey through kind of agile and DevOps and are now seeing the value of platform engineering. And I think for me, that resonated so clearly in all of the talks, in all of the discussions. There was, I didn't notice any comments or folks saying, actually, no, do you know what? Platform engineering is not it. It was very much a lot of, maybe it's a bit of an echo chamber, but in general, there were so many diverse voices and opinions and different sectors and different levels and like so many different voices, but all in some alignment that platform engineering is important and valuable and almost like the next frontier for us as a community to explore and define some practices and some norms around. And I think that really resonated in PlatformCon. So
yeah, I guess that's the same thing for me, because I guess that before platform engineering became a term, it became something like a topic. I guess everybody was doing it on their own. They were all trying to solve the same kind of issues, they were facing the same problems. We're all evolving through this cloud journey and discovering it at our own expenses, often in our own backyard. And I find it super exciting, those kind of events like the PlatformCon, where we kind of came to an understanding that there were other people like us facing the same issues, and that, to me, that was the biggest thing in the event, to no longer be alone on that journey, to realize that there was a community, that there were patterns, that they were best practices. There were, like you said, Paula, there were really like trends, like convergence of many things that all converge on the same in the same direction. So that was, to me, the biggest realization.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, looking at, obviously you both have been in the industry for a while. Where do you see this trend coming from, actually? Before we talk about where it's going, where have you seen it the first time? Where was the first time in your career where you're like, oh, I guess this is, where this is going? Maybe it was 2 days ago, Paula, for you, or like 2 days after, but I guess it's not the case. Where did you see it the first time? And by the way, Richard, for your question, the number of attendees, we had about 7,000 signups. It's really hard for me to tell how many attendees because of the nature of the format. We had about 6,000 viewers on the stream of day one, and I think over 4,000 people in the Slack. So maybe that helps. Sorry, Paula.
So it's kind of interesting. There's the, where do I think it's come from in the industry, and when did I first come across it? I think where it's come through from the last 20 years, let's say in my career, I think we've seen, to just go back in time a little bit, we've seen that the very traditional split dev and ops, right? So the ops are responsible for running stuff, but they have very siloed experience from the developers who are writing the code. And that was the way for a long time. And then like 2009, 2010, DevOps came along and said, oh, no, it has to come together. People should build it and they should run it themselves. And I think that's been a journey for lots of people. Maybe some people haven't gone on that journey, but for a lot of organizations, they have gone on that journey, and there's good and bad to that experience, where we've seen the rise more recently of kind of developer experience is key. If people are trying to do everything themselves, it's too much cognitive load. Developers can't do all the things, more problems creep in. So it feels like there's this pendulum swing between very, very siloed to no, we're going to come together, to hang on a second, coming together, with the nature of like microservices and like trying to do everything yourself makes it too much. So we need to split apart again. But actually that splitting apart is different. I think what I'm hearing is we're not advocating as a community to say, no, we're going back to DevOps. It's more application teams do DevOps together. They write and they run their code. So they have to write it and run it. And the platform team is also developing the platform. They're not just operations. They are also responsible for writing code that makes the platform work. So they're doing DevOps. So for me, it's an evolution. Where I've kind of really experienced this is in one of my past roles. So I ran platform services at Pivotal for Europe. And we worked with lots of different customers who were at the time trying to run Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which was a platform as a service, to be able to give a Heroku-like experience to developers, let's say. And we noticed patterns time and time again with the customers that were the most successful. And the first time I worked with some very smart people at Pivotal who were able to articulate it. We wrote a white paper, which we called Platform as a Product. And then I first spoke about it in a conference in 2018, actually, where I gave a talk, which was had some catchy title like "How to Delight Your Developers: Platform as a Product, How to Delight Your Developers," where I tried to articulate in that talk the practices we'd seen at Pivotal, working with multiple customers. The ones that were the most successful were doing a lot of the things that came out in PlatformCon. They were trying to measure. They were trying to have collaboration between the app teams and the platform teams. They were trying to advocate and internally market their platform. Lots of those things we had observed, like directly observed customers doing in my time at Pivotal. And then I talked about it then. So it's been, for me, a long time hearing the same things, but I think understanding what works and then actually trying to put it into practice, that's the challenge.
Yeah. And how do you say it, Matteo? Because I always found this sort of like cyclical evolution that Paula was describing really interesting, right? Because if you look at every other industry virtually, the macro trend has always been towards specialization, right? Each one since basically the industrial revolution, right? Yet, like at the forefront of technology and DevOps and software development lifecycle, we seem to have taken like a step back in a sense where, oh no, everybody needs to do everything, which I think is, and then when you put it in the context of, oh, the days of throwing over the fence and that didn't work at all, like, sure, but it's still very interesting how this came to be. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I kind of sit as a pendulum where like all the industry goes in one direction with like really to the extreme, and there we figure what's not working, and then we strive for the other opposite and like try to do the contrary as if that would be better. But what I see is that every time that you go to the other extreme, you learn from those mistakes, you learn from those different extremes, and you slowly start to converge towards a better ideal, which is kind of in between, like the Tao, like the the central line where equilibrium is, where everything is in balance. So I think that we as an industry we are learning from that and converging like that. But of course, we see that it's impossible, for example, for all developers to do all the DevOps things, like to understand like everything from very specialized like database queries and algorithms and all that, all the way to through to Kubernetes, to cloud operation, infrastructure, and all that. So it's impossible for everyone to do everything. So I see it more as a tendency towards like awareness, where everybody would be aware of the other roles, that they would expand their understanding of that pipeline, so that continuum from developers to ops, like all developers would be like more and more aware of what's like ahead of them, to the right side of things, if we can say that, And same thing from the ops side, where they would dive into the developer's reality and understand more their workflows and all that. So that's, to me, that's more a matter of getting everybody on the same boat, without that proverbial wall between them. So I see that as an abstraction. So we say that abstraction is good, abstraction is bad. Actually, it's the improper abstractions that are bad. So I guess that wall that was there before between dev and ops, it was a bad abstraction. And now we're trying to figure, okay, what are those good abstractions? How can we get people to collaborate better? And that's, to me, that's finding the proper abstractions.
There was an interesting, to your point, there was an interesting chat in the platform engineering Slack channel that I read through that talked about, asked the question, I think, around how to build that empathy. If folks are doing different roles, which obviously they are, how might an organization go about trying to build that empathy? If you don't want everyone to do everything, at least growing that understanding. And there was some discussion in the channel about secondments and about bringing people in even on rotation for a short amount of time so that people could gain that awareness that you talked about, Mathieu, without necessarily then having to go and perform that role, but having that shared empathy to understand, well, this is actually that situation that team is managing, to kind of grow the knowledge, grow the understanding, grow the awareness, even if then you're still doing your separate task, but that kind of, maybe that pokes holes in the wall so that there's the empathy, even if there's still separation of duties.
Yeah, and that was really a theme. Like I saw like a lot of talks about separation of concerns and separation of responsibilities, but yet a lot of topics about collaborations. And those two things could be perceived as contradictory, whereas they're really complementary. You need some abstractions if you want people to collaborate. But if it's the improper abstraction, then people are not able to do that collaboration. So, but there were a lot of discussion about levels of abstraction, like my talk, like Gregor Hope with his fruit salad versus fruit basket analogy, which I think really resonated in a lot of people. But that's really all about different levels of abstraction.
Yeah, 100%. And in fact, I think Gregor's was one of the most watched talks at PlatformCon this year. And as you said, he had this like really, I think, great. He had a couple of great analogies. I also really like the car one. So the building the platform around the car and so on. But yeah, to your point, he had this analogy on the fruit salad versus fruit basket that got picked up over and over in the Slack, and I think there were some pretty funny moments as well where people were kind of confused as well about all this like fruit talk. But in your talk, Mathieu, you kind of also explore a sort of like third path, a third option beside just the fruit salad and fruit basket. And maybe you can kind of like recap that for people and sort of explain what the third path in your view is.
Yeah, so I find that analogy super interesting afterwards when I could compare it to what I brought about. And at some point, I think that Gregor has ask yourself whether your approach is more fruit salad or more fruit basket. And while thinking about it afterwards, I was like, okay, maybe we should formulate it instead. Do you provide both approaches? Because the strategy I found that was working best was to, okay, provide that fruit salad option that should cover like pretty much 95% of cases. That should be the path of least resistance, that should provide the best value. That's the low-hanging fruit, all those things that we heard about during PlatformCon.
It might be good to give a quick recap of what the differences were between food? Because I myself was like, I watched the talk and I was like, I had to write it down to understand what's the fruit salad and what's the fruit basket.
Yeah. So at least in my understanding, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is that the fruit salad is a pre-assembled set of components that you can use like very easily. It's all like pre-built, pre-assembled, and you can just take it and use it or eat it.
And all the parts are finely balanced and they work together well, and it's like high value because you get.
Yeah, and they are all pre-connected, pre-wired together, like mostly pre-configured. And that in my talk, I refer to that as a complete recipe. And that's really a very close analogy to the fruit salad. So a complete recipe that you can just take and use as is. You don't need to worry about the balance of the ingredients and everything. And the other approach, which is lower level, and it's not less useful, it's just a different approach, is to have like the fruit basket, where you just provide the developer with all the building blocks and you can assemble them as you see fit, like Lego blocks. And that's super useful. But ideally, if you just provide those, if it's too low level, then you'll end up with a lot of complexity. Developers will need to understand how to assemble them properly and everything. So to me, that's really the fallback. So the main solution, the higher abstraction level, is the complete recipe, so the fruit salad. That should fit most of the cases. And then when that doesn't fit your need, you can fall back to something that's more do it yourself, that you can assemble. The components are still well defined and well packed, like packaged with everything in them to make them work, with observability if you need, with security and all that.
And supported as well, probably.
Yeah, supported, exactly. But the support is a little more difficult because they're not pre-assembled. So there's a little bit more troubleshooting needed, more understanding needed in order to assemble them. But that's really the second, like the lower abstraction level. And in our case, I figured that there was yet a third one when those blocks just didn't cut it, when it was not possible to use neither of those levels. You would need kind of an escape hatch, like a way to address the developer's needs by themselves. If they're proficient enough, they know what they're doing, they will need to use a specific technology that's not covered by the other paths, then they have a way to fall back to arbitrary, like raw components, whatever they want to include in the system, like an extensibility point. But that shouldn't exclude them or isolate them from all your ecosystem, from all your CI/CD pipelines, all the way you're doing things. They shouldn't be like put aside just because it doesn't fit what you thought was the right way to do it. So you should still provide that third path. So that was the way I saw it. And you could, with to just take Gregor Hope analogy to push it even further, I would name that third path bring your own fruits. Yeah. So that if we don't provide in the fruit basket, we don't provide the fruit that you're looking for, like maybe a dragon fruit or something very exotic, then just bring it and it will fit in all the rest.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar. It's interesting because I really like the way Gregor framed it. I think it was very good. And I liked your talk, Mathieu, the third path. I think that's absolutely true. I think it also relates quite closely to some of the things Daniel Bryant talked about, with relation to kind of the golden paths. Like there's many analogies you can draw to like the abstractions and how we want to, as platform engineers, we want to make life easy, that path of least resistance. We want to make that easiest thing for the developers. And I think in the kind of golden path analogy, it's like make the easy thing the right thing. I think Manuel Payas says it as well. It's like make the easy thing the right thing, and that's the golden path, or that's the fruit salad. But if that's not going to cover 100% of cases. So there have to be other paths available that are specific for the cases. And as platform engineers, I think the key to maybe understanding those things is about that collaboration with the teams that you are providing the platform for, understanding their requirements. And like you mentioned, it could be that someone goes to the greengrocers and buys a different type of fruit, and it turns out that it's specific for one team, that particular tool, but actually it has value that could then be shared to other teams. And if the platform team can bring that in, incorporate it into the fruit basket, or even into the fruit salad, like make it part of the paths, everybody benefits.
Yeah, and that's super interesting because we need to evolve as a platform. We've seen that a lot in all of the talks. Platforms need to evolve. Yeah. And in order for that evolution to happen, you need the input from developers. You need them to strive, like to go away from, like to walk away from the path and figure things out, and then we can bring it back into the main path. So if there's not that second or third path where they can like mess things up on their own and bring some innovation, then you don't have that room for growth. So I'd say that as a platform team, you want to standardize as much as possible, because that's the way that you make things easier for the platform team, but also for developers, for newcomers and all that. But by providing that room for innovation, for experimentation, then the platform team can then figure those trends, those new patterns that are emerging, and retrofit them, like to convert them into an official way of doing things. So it's always a balance. You want to limit the number of those different like snowflakes, those different, but you want to have like standardized snowflakes. Whenever you can, you take those and you make them into something that other people can leverage, and that's easier than for the platform team to support.
Which I think I agree completely, and I think it ties into something that I've heard Manuel say about the from team topologies, like the minimum viable platform. Like we definitely need to, in this framework of trying to meet developers' needs and give them the good experience, but also have standards and converge on certain practices to get the best practices across an organization. I think as a platform team, trying to have a goal of minimum viable platform is important, because if we have kind of, someone described it, I think, as technical bloat, if that happens within a platform team, you're ending up where the developers have too many choices and there's too many options. And as a platform team, it's hard to support. And as a developer just trying to ship some code, there suddenly are too many choices. So I think it's a really good kind of goal to try to keep in mind. Is like you say, it's great to give that freedom, but it's also important where if there's 5 or 10 different CI/CD tools within the platform that are being supported, and they're all basically the same, like if it's possible to kind of converge down, I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, and I heard many times that when developing a platform, we should limit freedom, we should restrict freedom. And I think it's really important to put that in context, to precise what we mean by that. So when we say limit freedom, like limit the number of choices that we provide to developers, that doesn't mean that they cannot do anything else. It just means that if you want to stay on that golden path, on that path of least resistance, then stick to those patterns, stick to those technologies, do it that way. But that's restricting freedom, and that has a lot of advantages, but it doesn't mean that this is the only way. So there's still freedom, but it's a different kind of freedom. It's yeah.
And this is a question by Luis, and please, if anyone else has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. That's the best place, or the chat's good too. So Luis asking, what are good tips for the updated maintenance cycle of the products and in general the standards that the platform team ships? Paula, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a nice question. Well, one of the themes that I think that came out from PlatformCon was about metrics, about measuring all different kinds of things, right? And different organizations are going to place different weight on different metrics. So there's the DORA metrics, that people are familiar with from DevOps, but there's different things people can focus on, like how many tickets the platform team is having to deal with. A metric in this case, if I'm understanding the question correctly, there could be a metric about, somebody talked about the net promoter score of how developers are feeling about the platform. So kind of doing surveys to check that the platform is still fit for purpose. Is it still meeting the needs of the platform teams? Which could look like the services being offered on the platform, are they up to date? Is the platform continuously offering the current latest versions of XYZ service? It could look like what we just discussed about the platform bloat. Like if there are 10 tools and 2 of them are really out of date and 8 of them are the latest versions, do I therefore just ignore 2 and just choose the most current ones? I think to try to answer the question specifically, I'm going to give the classic answer of it depends. It depends. But I do think that there is value as a platform team to be setting your own metrics or KPIs about, does the platform continue to remain fit for purpose? Does it continue to serve the needs? Is it up to date? Is it being maintained kind of sufficiently? Are new features being added frequently enough to keep developers productive? And how you set those metrics, I think, will depend very much specifically on your organization and what you care the most about. But I think we've seen it. It's a pattern we've seen where platform gets built in isolation. Platform team goes off and decides, we know what's right for the developers. We're going to build this platform. And then they build it. And then it's done, in quotes. The platform is done. It's finished. The platform team can disband. The platform has been shipped. Everyone can now use it. And it's quick to go out of date and not be maintained. And so how quickly it should be maintained is within your organization and what tools and technologies that you're using. But as a philosophy, I think continuous feedback in team topologies, again, they talk about lightweight ongoing collaboration. So there's collaboration up front to understand application teams' needs, to understand what service they need and to deliver it. But then there's an ongoing lightweight collaboration where you need to continuously check, did a new version of Jenkins get released? Okay, well, the platform team has it on the roadmap for this date. We will update it then, and all of you teams will have this new version pushed out. Like, it's collaboration, and what's the right size for your organization will depend on having that collaboration and understanding. I hope I answered the question.
And there's this constant pruning as well, right? That the platform team needs to do. That's also something that I think that you mentioned, Matteo, before, right?
Yeah. So that's part of what I was saying about, like, experimenting out of the paths, but that then bringing that back into, like, as much as possible into your standard way of doing things. The same thing about abstractions. So abstractions, so that they remain proper, you need to constantly tweak them. Sometimes you will go like too far in exposing internal details that are not really useful to the developers. So you need to pull back there and maybe simplify the interfaces, the control knobs that you're exposing to the developers. And that's, I find, to be the toughest part, because once it's out there, once people start to play around with those knobs and configure them, then it becomes very difficult to remove them, because sometimes some of the teams will have done configuration that matter like very much. Like example of those would be maybe a timeout value, where maybe a timeout value for deploying or running a job can be standardized across most of them, but in some cases, you want a different value. So that would be a useful control. But if you remove that afterwards, you never know if one of the teams really were using that to a meaningful end. So that for us, it requires a lot of investigation, of discussion with all the teams. Okay, are you using that setting? What are you using it for? Do you really need it? So to me, the best strategy would be to expose the least common denominator in the beginning that you think is really needed, and then open the configurations up to the outside world, like progressively, like cautiously, because the other way around is very taxing.
Which I think ties in very closely to the discussion around cognitive load, right? I think to your point about having kind of there's value in presenting to teams only the things that they need to configure that really matter, and abstracting away from teams stuff that really they don't care about at all, and they shouldn't worry about, so that when you're trying to give a good experience, a good developer experience to the developers, you give them the things that they care about. To your point, Mathieu, the knobs and whistles that they care about and are important to them, they are exposed, and the teams can have the values that they require. But if there's 1,000 things on a YAML form that they just don't care about, abstract it away, take it away, so that they have fewer things to worry about, less cognitive load. They can focus on the key things that they do care about and get to value quicker, basically.
And about that, something I find super helpful is a tip about using default values. Because when you expose like configuration to the developers, you can have like very meaningful default values that should cover the 95% of cases that no developer should have to provide in a general circumstance. But if they do, it's available. For example, that would be the timeout example I gave previously. So if there's, I think in one of our deployment pipelines, there was I think it was maybe 600 seconds, so 10 minutes timeout for doing the deployment, after which, or the build, after which it would just fail, assume that it's frozen. But in some cases, there would be like the website, I think had a lot of integration tests to run, and it was taking like twice as much time. So they needed to bump up the timeout to, I think it was 1800 seconds. So that the default value in our case was 600. So it would fit all of the needs. And we would ask developers not to configure it if they needed the default value. So not put it in, like just stick to the default value and let it undefined, because undefined is not the same as specifying the same value as the default value. Because afterwards, if as a platform team, we decide to say, okay, let's tweak that default to make it a little higher in general, then we know we can change the default, and all the teams that didn't really care about the timeout, they didn't have any problems about the timeout, they will have left it like undefined. So as a platform team, that gives us a lot of understanding. We don't need to go to them and say, okay, do you really need that specific value? We know that they didn't mess with it, so they don't really care about it. They didn't have any problem. But for the website, they did encounter a problem and had to bump it up. So we know that the value that they did provide explicitly was meaningful, so that even if we change the default value, it will be their override that's taken into account. So that's just a way to think about abstraction with default values, and with not specifying values that you don't care about, and insisting with the teams that they don't configure stuff that could work with the default values, just preserve that abstraction, to push it as far as you can go, so that even what's exposed is less a liability for the platform team, if people like stick to default values whenever they can. So I hope that it's not like too technical, but I find it a good way to think about a tip to manage your abstractions.
It's interesting because after my my talk was in PlatformCon, and I got asked a question very similar about what's the right abstraction level, to your point. And it's, again, the classic answer of it depends, because the example you just described, you're right, there's value in having all these default set that folks do, like a default that covers 95% of the cases, and then there's the one exception that is important. It's not an exception just because someone feels like it should be more. It's a valid use case, but it needs to be this extra value. And then I think the answer I gave in the Slack channel, which was the question, well, what's the right abstraction level, and what should people be able to configure and not configure? As I said, the classic answer of it depends. But what you just reflected on, I think, and what I heard is the way to figure that out is through this collaboration, right? Like, you understand the reason why that default isn't sufficient for that one particular team. Therefore, you have that built understanding between the two teams, and you can manage that in a way that the one team gets what they need, the majority of teams already have what they need, and it's like a win-win somehow. And I think that's the goal to really aspire to. In my mind, it's like, through that collaboration, through that building of empathy and understanding requirements, it's like minimum viable, maximum defaults, but trying to make sure that we take care of the edge cases as well.
Yeah, collaboration between the platform team and developers is really key. What we're trying to put in place right now is to have a DevOps liaison role in each of the development teams. So really someone who is a little more DevOps aware, that's more interested maybe about DevOps, but still a regular developer. He has like regular stories to work on during his sprint. But those people, those DevOps liaison, we want to meet together with them, with the DevOps team, and to make sure that we get like direct feedback from the teams, not just like abstract or high-level surveys. And that's useful surveys, especially if you're at a very large scale. But we really want to have first-hand inputs on how the platform is being used, and to also bring back the good news to the team. So when there's some new feature, there's a new pattern or something, someone that will advocate, that will really push all those new features, new best practices into the team. So I think that we need real people to do that link. We need people to preserve that dialogue between the platform team and the developers.
That sounds really interesting. Have you started that yet?
Yeah, I've just put it in place. So it's a big challenge to convince all the developers and the team leads and everyone to really allocate a bit of their time, because that's everybody's on a tight schedule. Everybody has features to deliver, so we understand that. But we want to bring about an understanding that every minute that goes into the platform is an investment that they'll get back like tenfold, that it's a multiplier of everything they're trying to accomplish. So we're not diverting resources away from what they're trying to accomplish. We're just trying to optimize it to make it more efficient. And we don't want much of their time. They won't be doing like a lot of DevOps tasks. It's just a matter of having a good dialogue back and forth.
Oh, we've lost Luca. Fine. I was gonna say that's really interesting. If it's it would be, I would love to see if once you've been running this experiment for a while, like a sort of an update or like a blog, if you posted like, how it's going and lessons learned from it, because it sounds like a really interesting thing to try. One of the things I picked up from Daniel Bryant, actually from his KubeCon talk, but he talked a bit about if you really want to know if your platform is succeeding, then go and watch someone using your platform. Like someone from the platform team go sit next to a person who's trying to do something and actually see it, which I think is another interesting way to try to gain understanding about if what you think you've built is actually how a thing is being used. So, hey, Luca, you're back.
I had a bit of a connection issue. Now I'm sitting in a sauna, which is great.
Oh, very nice.
So we have I love, by the way, the conversation and just all this, your minimal viable maximal default, for instance. There's a few people there enjoying that from the YouTube channel as well. So Jorge is asking, since we're talking about abstractions, where do you draw the line between build versus buy? So from a platform viewpoint, what's your advice on letting your development team building stuff that will then be managed, operated, and monitored by DevOps and platform team? That's a great question, Jorge.
I think that we've seen how that goes. I think it has to start with developers because they know what the architecture they want to put in place, and it's a normal course of action to have things like start or see light, the light of day, like in the development space. But then it shouldn't stay like that way because developers have a narrower perspective. They have the perspective of their team, of their service. And I think it's really the role of the platform team to have that broader vision, to have a look at all the different teams, all the different approaches that are adopted, and try to, and that's a big cognitive load. When you try to do that, try to synthesize, it's very demanding, but rewarding at the same time, to take all that and standardize it. And it cannot, I don't think it can ever stay just on the side of developers that build something, and then it's not a platform team that would do it. It would be just the ops, and we would be back to that proverbial wall with the dev that just like shoots something over the wall, and ops need to handle it. So I think it's really a collaboration, an evolution, a transformation, standardization of what the developers have come up with, and so that's an interesting challenge.
I mean, I personally love that question of build versus buy. And my personal experience, having worked in a company like Pivotal, which is full of very, very smart engineers. And a pattern I've observed is there's a natural instinct for engineers to want to build, right? There's a requirement, they need something. Oh, I can just knock that out in 5 minutes. And there's I've seen it over and over again where somebody creates a thing, and we see it in open source as well a lot. Like somebody creates a thing and then it's useful. It solves a specific thing. Only then it has to be maintained and people start using it. And then you find there's like this like huge weight of expectation on this tiny thing that got built, and someone has to maintain it and keep it up to date and secure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When I've worked with customers in the past, the framework I've always tried to think about is, if you're trying to make the decision build versus buy, like there are so many things people could build. And if you're a bank or if you're a food delivery company, whatever your core value is as a business, like if the thing that you're looking at building isn't adding value to your core business, if it's not differentiated, then maybe look at buying versus building. Because I like the Wardley maps. I don't know if you are familiar with that kind of framework, but he talks a lot about, commodity and what you can just buy. Like you shouldn't be, if you're not adding value or if it's not differentiated, whatever the tool is or the technology is. If it's undifferentiated, just buy it. The place to spend your engineering effort and your kind of innovation tokens of like where you really want to put your energy is going to be the differentiated value. What do you as a business offer? And I think, I mean, like I say, I've seen patterns where developers like to develop, right? Like that's the natural instinct. So they think, oh, I'll just make a thing. But actually the effort could have been better spent developing something that is core and adding value to the business, and just buying in a tool that maybe covers 90% of the cases. Not all tools fix all things, but it's just about where you spend your kind of innovation efforts, in my view. I have strong opinions of it because I've seen it over and over.
Yeah, I think that what I saw, I heard many people say that only you can build your platform. And it's important to put that in perspective. I really like what Victor Farsik said, that like building your own doesn't mean starting from scratch.
100%.
And that's the big nuance that we need to keep in mind. So I think that indeed, because all companies are unique, and as he was saying, like the medium to larger scale companies, most of them already have like their own processes, workflows, their own ways of doing things, their own assets, tools. So you cannot just throw that all away and like just pick a an existing tool that will do it all. It's pretty much impossible. And trying to retrofit everything you have into that, I think it's maybe a bad approach, but doesn't mean that you have to start from scratch. Like he said, like open up an IDE and start typing from zero. So what he was saying is, okay, we have a lot of proper tooling, of building blocks that we can use. There's what we saw through the conference. There's Backstage, Crossplane, Argo CD, Flux, Humanitech, your own company, Luca. So there's a lot of solutions out there. And I think that this urge of developers or engineers to build stuff should be like canalized, like channeled into using those things creatively to meet your business needs. So it's really not, I think it's not a bottom-up solution that's the best, where you have a tool that is given to you and you just try to deal with it, period. I see it more as the bottom up, where you have all those tools at your disposals and you figure which one is the best and how to assemble them together. And there's a lot of creativity and innovation that you can do at that level. So if you can channel your engineers to figure that out more in that direction, then they will be as happy to have created the platform. It will be more tailored to your company's needs, and you will have spent much less effort reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both of what you said. And do you feel like one of the and by the way, we're already over quite a bit on time, so but this is a great conversation, and thank you for both of your contributions. I want to wrap up maybe with one last thing, except that Luis has one more question. Well, we'll get to that. Can I coin the backstack?
I like it.
Backstage, Argo, Crossplane, and Kubernetes. Nice. Backstack. I like that. No, yeah. So what I wanted to ask you is, it feels also from what we were just discussing, right, that there is still a struggle, and we also see this a lot in the community of, hey, can you share more stories of building platforms? It feels like there's a lack around blueprints in a way, right? Or sort of like, hey, this is how, if you have this setup, or this is your target setup and you have this challenges, this is the, this is the tooling, whether it's open source, vendor, a mix or both, this is sort of the how-to that you can use, or how at least you can think about these things, right? Have you experienced the same thing? And do you think I guess like the where can we learn from as a platform engineering community from maybe other areas of DevOps or in general the development industry for this, right? Because we're obviously not the first ones that encounter it, but it seems like it's a very vivid, very felt issue in the community and in platform engineering in general.
I think it relates. I was going to say, I think it relates quite a lot to Nigel Kirsten's talk on day 2. He talked about a prescription for platform engineering. And in his talk, he mentioned how, taking DevOps as an example, like DevOps kind of came about in 2008, 2009, I think, where you had kind of folks coming together to talk about like how to improve kind of infrastructure and infrastructure as code and like making it better. I liked Nigel's talk where he tried to think about, if platform engineering is kind of this new thing, how do we have this map? How do we have this model to help people be successful in practice and in platform engineering, instead of, like you said, people all struggling with the same challenges, all trying to come up with the same solutions? How do we provide people I don't want to say roadmap, but a model? I think Nigel called it a model or a map of like, what are the steps on the journey to get to a good platform? And I agree. It's really interesting because, like I say, already in this talk, I've said it depends at least twice, because so much about building a platform is context specific. But I do think there are certain practices, like I say, I've worked in this space a large number of years with a large number of companies who have all experienced pain points. I personally am a big fan of the Team Topologies book as a way of, as a model, let's say. It's a good model of organizational structure, and it talks about platform as a product, which is a topic that's very close to my heart. And it talks about how to kind of improve the boundaries between teams to have clear responsibilities, but allow value to flow quickly through the business. And for me, that's a good starting point. I know that the Team Topologies folks also have some case studies. You mentioned about kind of war stories. How do we share pains and like learnings and like mistakes that we've made so that everyone can avoid them? I know that they have some good case studies on their website. I know, not to big up my colleague, but Colin gave a talk in PlatformCon about 20 years of platform engineering, what went wrong, where he tried to be very open and explicit about things that he's messed up in the last 20 years and learnings. And I do think this is the space for it. I don't have a clear answer of like, okay, we should do these 5 things and everyone's going to improve. I think it's like building that shared understanding. But I think there are some nuggets out there that we can kind of iterate on and improve on.
I personally would really love that we take all those nuggets out there and distill them, structure them into some kind of wiki that could eventually make its way into a book, a community contributed and driven book. That would be so great, because as we've said, we're just coming to a realization. I'm coming to a realization that everybody's like having those same issues on their own end, and we're coming together as a community now through events like PlatformCon and the engineering platform engineering community. So I guess a next step might be to have a roundtable with everyone who has a say in that, who has ideas to contribute. Like the speakers of the different talks and other people who are facing similar situation, and just try to distill all that knowledge, all those best practices, design patterns, like a design pattern book, the Gang of 4 book, that where you really document the different strategies for dealing with different scenarios. If we could come up with a design pattern book for platforms, that would be amazing. So that's a kind of a dream I've had for a little time now.
Nice. That's a good idea for the community. And I do want to share that we are planning to, so as some of you might know, we have already a tooling section on platformengineering.org, and the sort of evolution of that will really be to try and build more tutorials and blueprints using all the tools that are out there, and in different combinations, and hopefully those will be good starting points, at least for conversations internally within engineering organizations of all sizes, and then maybe, who knows, one day they will all make it into a book. I think that's it's a good vision to have for sure. Awesome. Well, Paula, Matteo, thank you so much for this conversation. This was really one of the, I think, most complete conversations that we've had in a while, and you both covered some really good points in various degrees of depth. So I think that was really great. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being part of the community in PlatformCon. And thank you for everybody for staying here with us until now.
Thanks, Luca. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luca, for having us here. That's super appreciated and super exciting. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well,